Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning scripture study coming to you live from St. Francisville, Louisiana. Thank you so very much for joining us today. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited about the class today. We're going to get into some things today that take us a little bit deeper into understanding our sources, the sources behind the Pentateuch. We are in the middle, roughly in the middle, I guess, a little bit to the more completed side. We are working through a year-long study of the annual cycle of the Pentateuch readings, and we are in the book of Bamidbar, This is class number 34 in our series called The Pentateuch, A New Look. And by a new look, I mean a different way to look at things, a deeper dive into the text. You know, I've been doing this for quite some time. All of you have been studying the Bible for many, many years, so we've looked at it. Now we're taking a closer look at the biblical text that we all love so much. We are in the book of Numbers, and we're dealing with a griping group of grumbling, discontented, and rebellious people. How's that for a description of our children of Israel? That's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on a rebellion, but we'll get to that momentarily. Last week we looked at a story of the so-called spies, as most English translations call the group of people, the representatives from each tribe that went at the command of, depending on which source you read, either God or the people's idea themselves or Moses' idea. We have different details depending on which story we read. Whether we read Numbers chapter 13 and 14, it gives one angle on this story. If we read the book of Deuteronomy, the opening chapter, chapter 1, gives us a seemingly totally different narrative. Some of the details are the same, some of the details are not the same, but that's what we're going to look at in each of these stories as we work our way through. But in last week's class, you'll recall that the whole assembly is sentenced to 40 years in the wilderness. I often tell our tour groups, whether I'm with Dr. Tabor or with Jono and Rabbi Singer, look, while you're here, no matter what happens, try not to gripe and grumble and say bad things about the people or the places that you see and meet along the way, because you might be over here for 40 years if you do that. Of course, some people actually hope that that's the case. But the children of Israel are sentenced to 40 years of wandering because of the bad report, according to the book of Numbers chapter 13 and 14. And today's lesson picks up on the heels of that. Today, right after the bad news that they are going to get a year per day, in other words, the spies, as they're called, were gone on a 40-day touring expedition. And by the way, the Hebrew word that's translated spy is tour in Hebrew. They're touring around, they're looking around, they're assessing the land. They come back, they were gone for 40 days, and because of their bad report, you get the 40 days in the wilderness. Now today's class, this week's Torah portion, the Parsha, picks up on the heels of that, almost immediately following that, and contains the story of a rebellion, a great rebellion. You might call it a mutiny. Oftentimes we use the word mutiny in association with rebellion against authority, primarily when you're dealing with soldiers or sailors, sort of a military coup, if you will. But that tends to fit what we see here, at least in part. We have a challenge that is issued to and against the leadership of the children of Israel. And by that I'm referring to Moses' leadership and the leadership of Aaron. Now this story puts this all together in one story. And the question I will ask you as we begin this is, did it begin as a singular story? Did the rebellion that is described, was it in its earliest rendition Was it the story of one rebellion or two? And you'll see what I mean by that. How could I possibly ask a question like that? Well, the text asked the question for me, so you'll see that as we work through. But the way that it is presented in the Bible as we have it today in the book of Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, it is presented as a joint confrontation. In fact, I've called this competing Kohathites. This class today is called Competing Kohathites. What we have here is a joint confrontation that is brought against the leadership of the children of Israel. Moses and Aaron jointly are the opponent of this attempted rebellion by a group of people consisting of Korah, a man named Korah. We're going to get into him in great detail. Two other men by the name of Datan and Aviram, plus 250 others, 250 men of the children of Israel, princes of the congregation, they're called. They are also referred to as called ones of the assembly and men of name. In other words, these are reputable leaders in their own right within the children of Israel. Remember, according to our Levitical literature, our priestly sources, according to these texts, what you're dealing with is 603,550 men, plus women, children, and so forth. And this group of 250 are presented as the top people within the congregation. They are leaders. So you've got Korah, and we're going to talk a lot about him. We're going to talk about the others involved, but I want to give you a heads up at the beginning. You know how in the Bible, when you're reading and you get to these places where genealogies, we have some pretty extensive genealogies in the Bible, and a lot of you might just kind of skip over that. This one begat this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Well, we're going to go through all of them today. No, not all of them, but we are going to delve into some genealogical tables because it's very important in this study. Because one of the things that I have to do at this point is begin to look deeply at the branches within the Levitical clans, because genealogy really matters. In fact, the argument today, the confrontation, it really comes down to certain family duties, as you'll see as we work through. Once I was warned in a piece of ancient literature about endless genealogies producing strife. So hopefully that's not the case. You can look that up on your own if it doesn't ring a little bell in your head. So I'm going to start today talking about a character by the name of Korah. And he is the person for whom this Parsha is named. If you look at a Jewish calendar, one that United Israel provides, you will see that this particular Sabbath, the Torah portion is Korah, and that covers from the beginning of Numbers chapter 16 through the end of Numbers chapter 18. Commercial break. Calendars have been ordered. If you received a calendar last year, chances are you are on my list already. If you don't want a calendar anymore, you can let me know. Or if you have moved and I need your address, your physical address, please send that to me. We'll be mailing those out. Sometime in August is the goal. Korah. We're dealing with Korah first. He is one of the leaders per the book of Numbers. Notice how I said that. In a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. He is a son of Yitzhar, who is in turn a son of Kohath, who is a son of Levi. If you didn't follow that, now you might need a scratch pad for some of this, because I didn't do the work for you this week. You're going to have to make some genealogical tables and follow the train of thinking in some cases. So that means that Korah is a grandson of Levi. He is a Levite. Now, there are three branches of the Levites. Each of these three branches, these families, these clans of Levites, descend from one of the sons of Levi. Levi has three sons, all right, and they are named in many sources. And listen, for the most part, the Bible is consistent on who those three sons are. Now, some of you might say, why would you say that? The Bible is consistent in this. Because genealogies in the Torah and in the Tanakh are problematic in places. You will see that as we work through our material over the next several months and years. You'll see difficulties. A lot of people like to look at difficulties in genealogies in Second Temple text and make fun of and say that they're problematic and that there are issues with them, but they fail to say the same or judge with the same measure the genealogies found within the Tanakh. Well, we're going to look at some genealogies in the Tanakh. But for the most part, the Bible gets this straight. Three sons of Levi. We're going to go through some text so that you get these names in your head. Work with me quickly. Genesis chapter 46 and verse 11. You may just, if you can't keep up, then just write these verses down. And of course, our faithful scribe will have these notes for you as well. Levi's sons, Genesis 46:11. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Now go to Exodus chapter 6 and verse 16. I just want to go through these quickly to establish this. Exodus chapter 6, verse 16. These are the names of Levi's sons by their lineage. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And the span of Levi's life was 137 years. The book of Numbers. This is part of the book that we are currently working through. Numbers chapter 3. Remember, Numbers starts with a bunch of numbers. Numbers of these tribes. Numbers chapter 3 and verse 17. These were the sons of Levi by name, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Numbers chapter 26. And you think, why are we doing all of these? You'll see the importance of this soon enough. Numbers chapter 26 and verse 57. This is the enrollment of the Levites by their clans. Of Gershon, the clan of the Gershonites. Of Kohath, the clan of the Kohathites. Of Merari, the clan of the Merarites. That's sort of tough to say with all those R's. Now, remember when I said that they're fairly consistent? When you get to First Chronicles, which is written much, much later, according to some estimations, you get a little bit of variation. You get difficulties in these genealogies. But one thing that shows up fairly consistently is that the name Gershon, Gershon, is spelled in Chronicles almost exclusively with an M, Gershom. Gershom. Now, why is that? Let me give you one example, and I'll let you look up the rest. Go to First Chronicles chapter 6. You might say, well, this is no big deal. Well, I think it's important, though. First Chronicles chapter 6, verses 1. Let's just read verse 1. And I think that in an English Bible, it's going to be verse 16. Chapter 6 of First Chronicles, verse 16. But in Hebrew Bible, it's verse 1. The sons of Levi, Gershom with an M, Kohath, and Merari. Now you might say, why is the name spelled that way in First Chronicles? This is actually pretty common in biblical literature. We see variations on names. Now in this particular case, I have a theory. When these texts were transcribed and copied over time, one of the things that's important is let's assume that some of these records are very ancient and they would have been written in Paleo-Hebrew. This is my explanation for how Gershon becomes Gershom. And when you look at the Paleo alphabet, the letter forms, the Nun and the Mem, roughly the M and the N, the Mem and the Nun and the Mem, it's like our M and N sound. They're very similar in ancient Hebrew. Not so in modern Hebrew, but in ancient Hebrew they would have been. Now, let me give you an example. In English, an N looks like an M, except it has one more hump, if I can describe the letter form that way, right? Well, it's very similar in Paleo-Hebrew. You can Google this, look up the letters if you don't know them off the top of your head. A Nun has a singular hump with a tick, and a Mem has two, just like in our alphabet. In fact, many of our letter forms actually come from very ancient letter forms, but that's another class. Now, there is an exception. 1 Chronicles chapter 23:6, just put this in your notes. There, it uses Gershon with an N. But the point of this is we have three sons of Levi. Levi has three sons. Gershon, which I think is the original name, Kohath, and Merari. Now, of those three sons, all three of those sons and their descendants are coming from, they are coming from the family of Levi, so they are all Levites, right? So if we look at this and we work our way through, we're going to recognize that this whole family descended from Levi. All of these are called Levites. Now, what I want to do is I want to focus on one of the branches of the Levites, and that branch is the Kohathites, the descendants of Kohath. Each of Levi's sons, the Gershonites, the Kohathites, and what did I leave out? I went through the what? The Merarites. I knew that was a tough one. But of those three, each of those three have certain tasks that they're responsible for. So let's look at the task of the Kohathites. Numbers chapter 3 and verse 31. Numbers chapter 3 and verse 31. Actually, if you look up to verse 27, you'll see we're dealing with Kohath. But as you work down, verse 31, this is talking about the Kohathite clans. Their duties comprised the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, and the sacred utensils that were used with them, and the screen, all the service connected with these. So the Kohathites are responsible for those things that I just described. Now notice that these are some pretty important things. The ark, the table, the curtain. Look at chapter 4 of Numbers, verse 4. This is the responsibility of the Kohathites in the tent of meeting, the most holy objects. They, of the three clans, they are responsible for the holiest things. Look at Numbers chapter 7. This plays into our confrontation, as you will see. Numbers chapter 7 and verse 9. Numbers 7 and verse 9 says that to the Kohathites, he did not give any. In other words, he's handing out carts and oxen to carry stuff. But he didn't give the Kohathites any, since theirs was the service of the most holy objects. Their porterage was by shoulder. You're not going to give the Kohathites a cart and some oxen. Why is that? Because the things that they are responsible for have to be ported about on the shoulder. In fact, this group of people, whenever we see in the Levitical literature that those who carry, it's talking about this particular group. Let me give you an example. Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 31, Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 9. Moses wrote down this Torah and gave it to the priest, sons of Levi, who carried the ark of Jehovah's covenant, and to all the elders of Israel. So who does he give? He writes the scroll, which we've done a lot of teaching on. He finishes it, although the Torah as we have it isn't finished yet, which is another subject. But he finishes it. He gives it to, this is a little scroll that Moses wrote in first person, and he gives it to the priest, and it specifically tells us that the Kohanim are sons of Levi, but they're a specific group of sons of Levi. Remember how many, we have tens of thousands of Levites. So does he just say, hey, you guys? He gives it to a certain group who carry the ark. Now, who is that? We just read Numbers chapter 3, Numbers chapter 4. It's the Kohathites. Look down at Deuteronomy 31, verse 25. Take this book of teaching and place it beside, let me back up, verse 25. Moses charged the Levites who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. He charges the Kohathites, according to the Levitical literature found in the book of Numbers, saying, take this book of teaching, this Torah, and put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and let it remain there as a witness against you. So what we have here is a very specific group, the Kohathites. And they are responsible for the most holy things among all of the Levites. They have this great responsibility. Now, the other Levites, their responsibilities are important too. You need the other things. You need the planks and the curtains and the, everything that's involved in the erection of the tabernacle to set the tabernacle up. But you do need these holy objects, and only one group is responsible for carrying that. So I'll give you these for your notes. Let me look at a couple more with you, just to make sure. Look at Joshua chapter 3. Joshua chapter 3 and verse 3. And it says, and he charged the people as follows, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being borne by the Levitical priest, you shall move forward. I just want you to know that according to the book of Numbers, it's very specific if you know that the Kohathites are the ones that are packing the ark, right? So he could have said, when you see the Kohathites, this is when you do such and such. Here are a couple of other references that you need for your notes, but I won't go there. Joshua chapter 8, verse 33. 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 15, and chapter 15, verse 26 are all important when we're dealing with the Kohathites. Now, again, the Kohathites are responsible for the most holy things. Only they can carry the holiest, and it was the Kohathites who were given the teaching of Moses. Now we have to take this Kohathite family down further. Within the family of the Kohathites, we have to look deeper into the family. We have 4 sons of Kohath, and the 4 sons are described throughout the text in fairly consistent ways. Look at Exodus chapter 6 and verse 18. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Itzhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. These 4 sons are the sons of Kohath. Now go with me. We're going to quickly go through some of these just to establish these 4 names. Go to Numbers chapter 3 and verse 19. Numbers 3, 19. And it says, the sons of Kohath by clan Amram, Itzar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of more in what is presented as later literature. If you go to First Chronicles, back in those, a lot of people don't read these, but these are important. First Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 28. And by the way, the numbering is different in an English Bible. If you're in an English Bible, it's going to be First Chronicles 6:2. First Chronicles 6:2, or 5:28 in Hebrew. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Itzar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Now you're going to go to First Chronicles 6:3, which is 6:18 in an English Bible. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Itzar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Pretty consistent, right? Now, there are other references, but I just need you to see a few of those to establish. So remember, we have 3 clans of Levi. We've now narrowed that down to focus on Kohath, and then Kohath has 4 sons, and now we're going to be drilling down into that. So we've got Levi. If you follow the line, we have Levi, Kohath, Itzar. Our Korah that we're dealing with in Numbers 16 and 17 and elsewhere is from, according to our text, he's from the family of Itzar, descended from Kohath, descended from Levi. He's a Kohathite and he's a Levite. And he's part of the group which is responsible for the holiest things. So now you kind of get a picture of that. Now, Korah and Datan and Aviram and 250 men of name are going to challenge Moses and Aaron. And Moses and Aaron are also Levites. They are also descended from Kohath. So this is a family squabble. Now go with me to Exodus chapter 6 again. Exodus chapter 6. And I think we'll just start in 18, and I'll highlight certain points as we walk through. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Itzar, Hebron, Uzziel. Go down to verse 20. Amram, remember Amram is a descendant of Kohath, took to wife his father's sister, Yocheved. So Amram marries his aunt, Yocheved. You could do that then. And she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the span of Amram's life was 137 years. Interesting, same lifespan as Levi. Now go down to verse 21. There we go. The sons of Itzar, Korah. See, there we have Korah is the first one listed as a son of Itzar. Now, look down at verse 24. The sons of Korah, Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. Okay. Now, I'm not going to chase this any further. I can tell you that these genealogies get really, really complex, but they're also interesting. I would encourage you to take what I've given you so far today and use the books of Exodus primarily, the book of Numbers a little bit where we have genealogies, and First Chronicles, and map those out side by side. You will find some interesting things. Now, back in Numbers chapter 4, let's go there. We're going to develop a probable cause for the contention that develops in our Torah reading today. In Numbers chapter 4, we're dealing with the Kohathites. Just so you get the context, verse 1 of Numbers 4, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, "Take a census of the Kohathites among the Levites by the clans of their ancestral houses." And so this particular text is dealing with a census of, or a command to do a census of the Kohathites. Remember verse 4, they have the most sacred things or objects assigned to them as a job. Now listen to this, verse 5. In the middle of this story about the Kohathites, it says, remember, they're responsible for the most holy things, but there's a caveat. Verse 5, at the breaking of camp, Aaron and his sons, who, by the way, are also Kohathites, but they're from the family of Amram. So the Kohathites, the family of Itzhar in particular, have a task, but then, now watch this. Aaron and his sons shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the ark of the pact with it. They shall lay a covering of dolphin skin over it and spread a cloth of pure blue on top. They shall put its poles in place. Over the table of display, they shall spread a blue cloth. They shall place upon it bowls, ladles, jars, libation jugs. Regular bread shall rest upon it. They shall spread over these a crimson cloth, which they shall cover with a covering of dolphin skin. They shall put the poles in place. Then they shall take a blue cloth and cover the lampstand for lighting with its lamps, its tongs, its fire pans, as well as oil vessels that are used in the service. They shall put it and all its furnishings into a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame. They shall then next spread a blue cloth over the altar of gold and cover it with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put its poles in place. If you're thinking where they get these dolphins, that is a question that people debate the meaning of that word, but that's another class. They shall take all the service vessels with which the service in the sanctuary is performed, put them into a blue cloth, cover them with a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall place on a carrying frame. They shall remove the ashes from the copper altar and spread a purple cloth over it. Upon it they shall place all the vessels that are used in the service, fire pans, flesh hooks, the scrapers, the basins, all the vessels of the altar, and over it they shall spread a covering of dolphin skin. They shall put its poles in place. Now, in other words, per this passage in Numbers, the ones responsible for the most holy things are then basically told, you stand outside. The sons of Aaron will come in and cover everything up. Why do they cover everything up? Look at verse 15. When Aaron and his sons had finished covering the sacred objects and all the furnishings of the sacred objects at the breaking of camp, only then shall the Kohathites come and lift them, so that they do not come in contact with the sacred objects and die. These things in the tent of meeting shall be the porterage of the Kohathites. Responsibility shall rest with Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, for lighting oil, the aromatic incense, the regular meal offering, etc. So one of the things that we see, look at verse 17. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, don't let the group of Kohathite clans be cut off from the Levites. Do this with them, that they may live and not die when they approach the most sacred objects. Let Aaron and his sons go in and assign each of them to the duties and to his porterage. But don't let the Kohathites go inside and witness the dismantling of the sanctuary, is the way my translation has it, lest they die. So you see, the Kohathites who are responsible for this, they're not allowed to even look on this. They can carry it, but they're not allowed to look on it. Now, what begins to happen, and this is an example, we're going to get into this more and more as we go through our study. A distinction is made in several texts in the Pentateuch between Levites and priests. There are some texts, underline some texts, that suggest that only the sons of Aaron are priests, but not regular, notice how I say regular Levites. Now, some of you are saying, of course, the Bible says that in some texts. Some suggest something else, but this is the source of the conflict. We're going to slowly begin to study this, but suffice it to say for the moment that some texts distinguish between the priests, who are in some texts always the descendants of Aaron, and some texts which make the Levites in a priestly role. Now, what we have in Numbers chapter 16 and 17, and I'm not going to leave that just sitting there without exploring it, it's coming. But in Numbers chapter 16 and 17, we have two separate challenges being presented collectively to Moses and Aaron. It seems that there are two different causes of contention, but both of them tied to leadership. The people, Korah, Dathan, Aviram, and 250 leaders of name, are all basically challenging the leadership of Moses and Aaron. But it seems like there are two complaints. Dathan and Aviram they're Reubenites. So they probably don't have an issue with who the priest is, right? Their argument is against just Moses' leadership. In fact, we'll see their complaint, but it seems separate from what Korah and some of the others, the 250, are really, theirs is a religious sacerdotal complaint. They're talking about, why do you get to do this? It reminds you of Miriam and Aaron when they challenged Moses' leadership. Basically, why is he so special? Aren't we prophets too? Remember that? Well, this is kind of the same thing. From Korah and the 250. Dathan and Aviram they're mad at something else, which we'll see. But what we have in Numbers chapter 16, if you go there, we're going to begin to look at this particular complaint. And let's look at the beginning of it. Chapter 16, verse 1. Now Korah, son of Itzar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, betook himself, along with Dathan and Aviram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. And they combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, Rav Lachem. My translation says, you have gone too far. But in Hebrew, it literally means, much is to you, plural. Y'all have much. See, they're upset. They're jealous, if you will. Some people might interpret this. But the challenge is, you've gone too far. You have much. You've assumed too much. You've taken on more. And why does he say this? He goes, because the whole congregation is holy. Now, is he wrong? All the way back in Exodus 19, God tells the children of Israel that they're to be a holy nation. So Korah and Dathan and Aviram and 250 are together in this. They have different reasons for challenging, but in this story in the book of Numbers, they're conflated into one opposing confrontation. Much is to you. Moses' leadership over Israel, perhaps Aaron's leadership of the Levites. The whole of Israel is holy. Why do you lift yourself up? If we read through, we'd see, why do you lift yourself up above the assembly of Jehovah? Look at verse 7. Now, at verse 7, Moses, basically in verse 4, he hears this and he falls down on his face. And then in verse 6, he says, do this, you, Korah and all your band, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before Jehovah. Then the man whom Jehovah chooses, he'll be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. So he flips it on them. They said, Rav Lachem, much is to you. Moses in verse 7 tells it right back to them. You're the ones that have gone too far. Now what happens next is these opponents in our story in Numbers chapter 16 have come together to strengthen their cause. They have different objectives, but they want to strengthen their front against Moses and Aaron. What Moses does, according to Numbers chapter 4, is he cuts to the chase. So he addresses Korah by himself, and he addresses Datan and Aviram by themselves. And it's a divide and conquer strategy, and it works pretty well. In verse 8, hear me, you sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart for the community, from the community of Israel, and given you access to him to perform the duties of Jehovah's tabernacle and to minister to the community and to serve them? Now he has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you. Do you seek the priesthood too? So again, the book of Numbers is showing us that there is a distinction to be made. You're already Levites. You're Kohathites. You're responsible for the most holy things. Now you're telling me you want the priesthood too? Much is to you. In other words, you've got enough already. So he's really hard on them here. Now what he challenges, notice one of the things that is interesting here, he tells them, get you some fire pans. This is actually pretty interesting because the duty that he gives them is, you want to be priest? Go get your fire pan. Now why would this be sort of now Korah has to do it. I mean, how can he not? He's just basically said he wants to be a priest. So now you want to be a priest? Take your fire pan. Now, why should they be concerned about the burning of incense in fire pans? Remember what happened in Leviticus chapter 10? Aaron's two sons, and they were, according to the priestly writer, they were eligible to perform these tasks, but they did something wrong. People debate whether they were drunk or whatever they did wrong. But whatever they did, they died in the act. So Moses is basically saying, he's got a tongue in cheek. You want to be priest? How about let's do the old fire pan trick. That's just my twist on things, but you get it. But Nadav and Abihu are sons of Aaron, and they go in with this fire, and they're struck dead. Okay, now look at verse 16. Moses, let me show you verse 12. In verse 12, he faces to Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliab. And they said, we're not coming. Moses sent for them, and they said, we're not coming. I thought they were right there, but here it seems to suggest maybe they all came, and then they went away. Verse 12 is he sent for them. They said they're not coming. Verse 13, is it not enough that you brought us, this is their answer, from a land flowing with milk and honey? Isn't that interesting? And to have us die in the wilderness, that you also lord it over us. So their point, Moses has told them he's going to bring them to a land of milk and honey. And they said, not only have you not delivered us into this milk and honey place that you talked about, you took us from milk and honey. See, they're challenging something different. It's not about the priesthood to Datan and Abiram. They're against Moses. Korah has a problem with Aaron and his sons. Why? Because they have to get out of the tower and watch Aaron and his sons. Oh, here comes Aaron. He's got to do his thing. You can almost imagine. I mean, I'm really thinking that there's some jealousy here. And so they have to stay outside. So Korah, his complaint is against the priesthood issue. Datan and Abiram, you don't get the impression that they're so concerned about that. I mean, that's a battle for the Levites. We just want to know why we're out here starving and looking for water when we had that before you brought us into this, on this journey to go to a land of milk and honey. You caused us to leave. That's what you did. Now, verse 16, he turns back to Korah. Tomorrow, you and all your company appear before Jehovah, you and they and Aaron, and everybody's going to bring their fire pan, and they did that. Verse 19, Korah gathered the whole community against them at the tent of meeting. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, the presence of Jehovah appeared to the whole community, and Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, stand back from this community, and I may annihilate them in an instant. But they fell on their faces and said, O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? Interesting question. It reminds me of Abraham interceding on behalf of Lot and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. So God says, I'm going to annihilate the whole bunch. And Moses, the intercessor, like Abraham, the intercessor, says, wait a minute. How's the judge of all the earth going to do unjustly? What if, you're going to kill everybody for the sake of a few? So what Moses sees is you've got roughly 253 rebels. Not 603,550, you see. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the community and say, withdraw from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, the elders of Israel following. He addressed, move away from the tents of these wicked men, touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for all their sins. So they withdrew from the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now it shows that Dathan and Abiram, next verse says, they come out and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. Verse 28, Moses said, by this you shall know that it was Jehovah who sent me to do all these things, and they are not of my own devising. If these men die as all men do, in other words, if they live out their lives, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not Jehovah who sent me. But if Jehovah brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, you'll know that these men have spurned Jehovah. Now scarcely had he finished speaking all these words when the ground under them burst asunder, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their household, all Korah's people and all their possession. They went down alive into Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said the earth might swallow us. And a fire went forth from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. Strange. Now, verse 32 says, all of Korah's people gobbled up. Now, chapter 17 goes into the story of how the fire pans, remember the fire pans, they brought the fire pans to challenge who was it that was holy? God was going to show them who was holy, and the fire pans were left on the ground. I guess when the ground opened up, you imagine, and I'm just trying to picture this, did the ground open up and they let go of the fire pan, the ground closed back up, and the fire pans are there, according to the narrative. And then the fire pans are used to plate the altar. They got plenty of it because you've got 250 of them. Now, look at verse 5. As the Lord had ordered him through Moses, it was to be a reminder to the Israelites so that no outsider, one not of Aaron's offspring, should presume to offer incense before Jehovah and suffer the fate of Korah and his band. So the story of the fire pans and the fate of Korah, what was the fate of Korah? He and everyone that was with him, according to verse 32, were eaten up, and then fire came out. And this story is so that you know, according to Numbers, that there is not anyone other than descendants of Aaron that can function in this capacity. You've gone too far, sons of Levi. Know your place. Know your place. Now, in chapter 17, look down at verse 14, Numbers 17:14. Those who died of the plague came to 14,700, aside from those who died on account of Korah. Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting, since the plague was checked. And then this is followed by a story of Aaron's staff, which is another story that deals with who is holy and who is the dominant force of the Levites in terms of the priesthood. But listen, not everyone of Korah died. Verse 32 of 16 seems to suggest that, but look at chapter 26. Numbers 26. And let's go to verse 5, Numbers 26, verse 5. Reuben, Israel's firstborn, descendants of Reuben, of Enoch, the clan of the Enochites, of Palu, the clan of the Paluites, of Hetzron, the clan of the Hezronites, of Carmi, the clan of the Carmites. These are the clans of the Reubenites. The persons enrolled came to 43,730. Born to Palu, Eliav. The sons of Eliav were Nemuel and Datan and Abiram. That's our two rebels, remember? These are the same Datan and Abiram, chosen in the assembly, who agitated against Moses and Aaron as part of Korah's band when they agitated against Jehovah. Whereupon the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with Korah. When that band died, when the fire consumed the 250 men and they became an example, the sons of Korah, however, did not die. Well, that's interesting. The sons of Korah didn't die. It shouldn't surprise us because this is a biblical principle, at least in some texts, that just because a father is bad, the sons don't have to pay for it, and vice versa. It's a principle. As Moses put it just a few moments ago, we read in Numbers chapter 16, verse 20 through 22, should the whole congregation die because of one person's crime? Now, let's look at a couple other texts on this topic. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 24. This later becomes encapsulated in law. Chapter 24 and verse 16 says, "Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. A person shall be put to death for only his own crime." Go with me to Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah 31. This is a principle that a lot of people just don't understand. Chapter 31 and verse 29. "In those days they shall no longer say, 'Parents have eaten sour grapes and children's teeth are set on edge.' But everyone shall die for his own sins. Whoever eats sour grapes, his teeth shall be set on edge." You get the idea. The idea is like that if somebody is saying this, they're saying, it's just not fair. My dad ate sour grapes and my teeth are gritted. You eat a sour grape, you go, oh. Meaning that I'm getting the effect of something he did. Notice, by the way, that this particular proverb is immediately followed by the New Covenant, which many people believe is this idea, most people's understanding of the New Covenant is that one person can pay for what someone else did. But this text suggests that everyone's responsible for themselves. Look at Ezekiel 18. And by the way, I'm not going to read all of 18, but look at 18 of Ezekiel, beginning in verse 1. "The word of Jehovah came to me, 'What do you mean by quoting this proverb upon the soil of Israel? Parents eat sour grapes, and their children's teeth are set on edge. As I live, declares the Lord God, this proverb shall no longer be current among you in Israel. Consider, all lives are mine. The life of the parent and the life of the child are both mine. The person who sins only, he shall die.'" And then Ezekiel goes through and gives examples, various examples to underscore the idea that a person has to pay for their own sins. You're not going to pay for something your parents did. Now, it became a proverb, and it's still a proverb today. People believe this, but we have to look at this. So I suggest people read Ezekiel 18, the whole chapter, carefully and prayerfully, and that will straighten many people out on theology. Okay, 1 Chronicles chapter 6. Let's go there. We're going to go a little bit further in these chronologies, these genealogies, I should say. 1 Chronicles 6 and verse 7. 1 Chronicles 6, 7. Actually, in English, it's going to be verse 22, sorry. 6, 7 in English. 6:22, in Hebrew, 6:22 in English. It says, the sons of Kohath, his son Aminadab, his son Korah, his son Asir. Wait a minute. Kohath is, who's his father? His father is Itzhar. Here it says Aminadab. So we have a problem. We have a difficulty here, but we're not going to solve that today. It says, sons of Kohath, his son Aminadab, his son Korah, his son Asir. That's correct. His son Korah, his son Asir. Now here's what I think happens in this particular place. Aminadab, this is more than you bargained for, but it's a side study. Aminadab is in fact a descendant of Kohath, like Korah. But he's actually the son of Uzziel. And you can find that in 1 Chronicles 15, verse 10. Aminadab is Kohathite, but somehow the scribes confuse this. Now, if you look down as you work through, we're looking at this Kohathite genealogy, and look down at verse 22 and 23, which in the English is verse 37 and 38. I can't apologize for the differences in numbering, but that's just the way it is. So if you're in Hebrew, it's 6:22-23. And we're going down this line. Son of Tachat, son of Asir, son of Eviasaph, son of Korah. All right. Now look at verse 18. Go back up to verse 18, which is 33 in English. These were the appointed men, and their sons were the Kohathites, Haman, some of y'all pronounce that He-Man, the singer. It's Haman, the singer. Now I know this singer. How do I know this singer? Go to Psalm 88. Psalm 88. And get ready. Psalm 88. This is by Haman. It says a song, a psalm of the Korahites, or the sons of Korah. For the leader on Mahalat Leanot, a maskil or a psalm of Haman the Ezrahite. Haman is one of the sons of Korah. Remember we read that the sons of Korah didn't die? Remember that the sons of Korah are Levitical people? And there happen to be associated with this particular psalm. In fact, there are several psalms which are written by the sons of Korah. And here they are. Write this down. From chapter 4, Psalm 42, 43. 43, by the way, in the original is not a separate psalm. It goes with 42. So 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49. Another way to say that is 42 through 49 are psalms of the sons of Korah. Psalm 84 and 85 are psalms of the sons of Korah, and Psalm 87 and 88. These are beautiful psalms. I read them and studied them this week. We don't have time to go into a lot of detail on them. But look with me at Psalm 84. Psalm 84. These are the sons of Korah. Listen to what they say. I'm just going to read verse 10 and 11. O God, behold our shield. Look upon the face of your anointed. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather stand at the threshold of God's house than dwell in the tents of the wicked. Interesting that the sons of Korah would say that. Remember, the problem in Numbers chapter 16, according to our text, is that they had to stand in the courts while someone else did the work inside. And they said, we're just happy to be here, guys. It's better to be a gatekeeper in the house of the Lord than being in the tents of the wicked, a story the sons of Korah know very well. Gatekeepers. Look with me, go with me to 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles chapter 9. 1 Chronicles chapter 9. You got to read this Chronicles stuff. It's really interesting. Beginning in verse 17. The gatekeepers were Shallum, Ahub, Talmon, Ahimon, and their kinsman Shallum was the chief. Hitherto, in the king's gate on the east, they were the keepers belonging to the Levite camp. Shallum, the son of Korah, the son of Aviasaph, son of Korah, there's our Korah, and his kinsmen of his clan. The Korahites were in charge of the work of the service, guards of the threshold of the tent. Their fathers had been guards of the entrance to the camp of Jehovah. Do you remember that? You remember how they were guards of the tent? Yeah, it doesn't really say that, but okay. Now let's look at chapter 26. Wait, let me see something. Let's look at 1 Chronicles 9 and verse 31. Mattitiah, one of the Levites, the firstborn of Shallum the Korahite, was entrusted with making the flat cakes. And also some of their Kohathite kinsmen had charge of the rows of bread to prepare them for each Sabbath. Now this is interesting because what we have is Korah, his descendants are doing things that it wasn't described as their duty. Their duty in the Pentateuch was the holiest things, and carrying the ark and the holiest items, and now they're presented as like gatekeepers, and they make bread, they're like bakers and gatekeepers. Now this could be, I'll show you a reason why it could be. Look at 2 Chronicles 35. 2 Chronicles 35 verse 3. This is part of the story of the reform under Josiah, where the temple is restored, etc. Look at verse 3, and this is Josiah speaking. He said to the Levites, consecrated to the Lord, who taught all Israel, put the holy ark in the house that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built, as you no longer carry it on your shoulders. See now to the service of the Lord your God and his people Israel, and dispose yourself by clans according to your divisions, as prescribed in the writing of King David in the document of his son Solomon, and attend in the sanctuary by clan divisions on your kinsmen, the people by clan divisions of the Levites, having sanctified yourself, etc. Here's what I'm thinking. This is just me thinking out loud online to a public group. It seems like perhaps once the temple is built and you have a permanent structure, the ones who carry the ark and the holy items, what's their job going to be now? You say, well, look, maybe they could make bread. You guys know how to bake? We know how to bake. Make the bread. Can you guard the door? We can guard the door. We'd rather be there than in the tents of the wicked. These are speculations. But there's no command like it says in the one we just read in chapter 9, verse 17, etc. It doesn't say that, it doesn't say in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, that they were gatekeepers. This is something that happens later. Again, perhaps once they no longer have to carry the ark. All right, look at 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 19 while we're right here. Chapter 20, 2 Chronicles 20 and verse 19. Levites of the sons of Kohoth and of the sons of Korah got up to extol the Lord God of Israel at the top of their voices. So they engaged themselves in song, which is evidenced by the fact that we have these psalms that are attributed to the sons of Korah. But I have one thing to wrap things together as I get ready to close today, and I want to do this. Can I, you know I'm going to anyway, Can I go a little bit further, just a little bit more challenging on this subject? What about our rebels, the other rebels, Datan and Aviram? Go with me to Deuteronomy 11. Deuteronomy 11. Remember, the book of Numbers pictures this rebellion as a joint rebellion between Korah, Datan and Aviram, and 250. Can you think of a reason you would describe this confrontation and leave out any of those? If it's important enough to go in the book of Numbers like this, you would think. But look at Deuteronomy 11, and let's read verse 2. Take thought this day that it was not your children who neither experienced nor witnessed the lesson of the Lord your God. His majesty, his mighty hand, his outstretched arm, the signs, the deeds that he performed in Egypt against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land. What he did to Egypt's army, its horses and chariots, how the Lord rolled back upon them the waters of the Sea of Reeds when they were pursuing you, thus destroying them once and for all. What he did for you in the wilderness before you arrived in this place. What he did to Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them, along with their households, their tents, and every living thing in their train from amidst all Israel. But that it was you who saw with your own eyes all the marvelous deeds that the Lord performed. Somebody's missing in that story. Doesn't say anything about Korah. You say, well, he just left that out. It's a pretty big part of the story. It's not mentioned here. You have to wonder why. At least I have a question. Why does he mention, if he's going to mention the rebellion of Datan and Aviram, why not say, and Korah? It's one more name. Go to Psalm 106. Maybe this is unique. Maybe it's just one case and it's, I don't know. Psalm 106. Psalm 106 is interesting. It's an account of events from the wilderness. Let's give you an example. Let's start in verse 6. We've sinned, Psalm 106, verse 6, we've sinned like our forefathers. We've gone astray, done evil. Our forefathers in Egypt did not pursue your wonders. They didn't remember your abundant love, but rebelled at the Sea of Reeds. Yet he saved them as befits his name to make known his might. He sent his blast against the Sea of Reeds. It became dry. He led them through the deep as through a wilderness. He delivered them from the foe, redeemed them from the enemy. Water covered their adversaries. Not one of them was left. Then he believed his promise. Then they believed his promise and sang his praises. But they soon forgot his deeds that would not wait. They would not wait to learn his plan. They were seized with craving in the wilderness. Remember that? That's like Numbers chapter 11. And put God to the test in the wasteland. He gave them what they asked for, then made them waste away. Hey, there was envy of Moses in the camp and of Aaron, the holy ones of the Lord. The earth opened up and swallowed Datan, closed over the party of Aviram. A fire blazed among their party, a flame that consumed the wicked. Somebody's missing. Interesting that here, like in Deuteronomy, there's no mention of Korah. Now, could it be that the author of Psalm 106 didn't know about Korah? Now, the fundamentalist and many people who are listening to me might say, absolutely not. It's just a high-level overview, and they didn't include Korah. Well, I'm wondering if that's what it is, or if the psalmist here is familiar with a story of a rebellion in the wilderness of Datan and Aviram, but he doesn't know about the other. Deuteronomy is written, it describes a confrontation, an argument, if you will, but it only knows of Datan and Aviram. Numbers and the story of Korah And what follows is not in Deuteronomy, it's not in Psalm 106, and the question is why. Numbers is Levitical literature. It's presented, the story is presented as a way to say, Levites, it's not enough to be a Levite. You have to be a son of Aaron to perform certain tasks. Deuteronomy doesn't use this same language. So for instance, Numbers has the sons of Aaron outrank all other Levites. They're called the priest, the sons of Aaron. Anytime you have priest, you're talking about the sons of Aaron in priestly literature. And Deuteronomy never says, get this, priest, sons of Aaron. Deuteronomy always says the priest, sons of Levi. The priest, sons of Levi. It represents a story. Now, we're going to get into this over the next several months as we work through the rest of Numbers and Deuteronomy. You're going to see a distinction. You're going to see some differences in the way the priest, comma, Levites, comma, sons of Aaron. You're going to see how these terms are used by various writers. Look at, go with me quickly to Deuteronomy chapter 10. Deuteronomy 10 and verse 8. 10 and verse 8. At that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Lord's covenant, to stand in attendance upon the Lord, to bless His name, as is still the case. That is why the Levites have received no hereditary portion among their kinsmen. The Lord is their portion, as the Lord your God spoke concerning them. Again, throughout the other text, not Deuteronomy, but Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, there is a specialized category that's exalted, the sons of Aaron. Deuteronomy, in fact, only mentions Aaron 3 times. Get this, 3 times only. The first occurrence is in chapter 9 and verse 20 of Deuteronomy. And in that text, Moses says that God was so mad at Aaron, he was going to kill him. Remember the golden calf thing. The next one is Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 6, where it talks about the death of Aaron, his death and burial. And by the way, the burial is in his location of death and burial is in a different place in Deuteronomy chapter 10 than it is in the rest of the Bible. It's not on Mount Hor. I'll give you a hint. It's not on Mount Hor. I'll give you another hint. It's in a place called Moserah. Moserah, I should say. Moserah. Now, the third occurrence of Aaron's name in Deuteronomy is chapter 32, verse 20, at his death. Aaron's death. So it says that God was so mad he was going to kill him. It mentions his death and burial in a different place than is mentioned elsewhere in the Pentateuch, and then it's mentioned about his death. There's nothing about the sons of Aaron. Deuteronomy only knows of the priest, the Levites. But this is going to make more sense. Stick with me on this. Don't get so nervous. Just hang with me because we're going to keep studying this and figure out what's going on. The biblical texts present us with many questions, and we have to be willing to consider all possibilities that are presented by these texts. We have to ask tough questions. We have to. And you can say, well, I don't have to. Well, you don't have to, I guess. You should. Like, why does Deuteronomy 11 mention Datan and Abiram? To add Korah, you know how long it takes? It's 3 letters. But it's not there. Why does Psalm 106 leave out Korah? It's 3 letters. And why does the writer of Chronicles portray the Kohathites as bakers and gatekeepers when the earlier version, according to normal chronology thinking, Book of Numbers, has him in an exalted place. The Levites are set apart for service. One family is singled out and set apart for the holiest things. They're called the Kohathites. Within this family, there are two groups competing of the Kohathites. Amram's kids, children, descendants, and the descendants of Itzhar, or Aminadab, as Chronicles has it in one place. Now, I would encourage you to be thinking about these things as we prepare for next week's class. Spend some time, by the way, reading these Sons of Korah Psalms, 42 through 49, 84 and 85, and 87 and 88. Next week, Israel is back on the move. Now get ready for this, because next week, Miriam dies, Aaron dies. There's another story about getting water from a rock, not Iraq, I-R-A-Q, but a rock, getting water from a rock. Serpents, there's a story of serpents, and Moses is going to make what later becomes the idol of all the earth. This and more in next week's class. Don't miss it. Same time, same channel. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.